For 13 years, a Portal movie has been trapped in development hell. But the solution to Valve's biggest cinematic problem might have just arrived in an unexpected place. If you bought a ticket for A24's Backrooms over the past week, you likely went in expecting a pure masterclass in internet native horror. You got that, as the movie completely shattered box office expectations, pulling in a historic $81.5 million domestic opening weekend and a mind-blowing $141 million globally in its first 7 days. It is officially the biggest opening weekend in A24's history, and traditional Hollywood studios are scrambling to understand how a 20-year-old independent director pulled it off. But if you are a gamer, a deeper look beneath the yellow wallpaper and the hum of the lights reveal the structural foundation of a completely different universe. Hidden within the walls of this record-shattering movie is a series of deliberate creative cues, environmental layouts, and audio assets lifted straight from Valve. Kane Parsons didn't just make a standard psychological thriller, he quietly engineered a massive cinematic proof of concept for a franchise that traditional Hollywood spent over a decade failing to adapt. In his recent interviews, Kane explicitly confirmed what his core fan base has suspected for years. A feature film adaptation of Portal is his ultimate, absolute dream project. If Valve truly wants to bring Aperture Science to the big screen, they finally have the leverage to make it happen. Work with the one director who built his entire creative identity inside their sandbox. To understand why Kane Parsons represents such a massive turning point for video game cinema, we have to look back 13 years. In February of 2013, Gabe Newell stood on stage next to J.J. Abrams at the DICE Summit and announced that Valve was officially partnering with Bad Robot to develop feature films based on Half-Life and Portal. For years, Valve had guarded its intellectual properties, routinely turning down pitches because mainstream screenwriters fundamentally misunderstood the core mechanics of game design. They believed partnering with a legendary blockbuster director would break that curse. Instead, the project slipped into a notorious decade-long cycle of development hell. For 8 years, updates were virtually non-existent, leaving fans to assume the deal was dead. Then, in May of 2021, J.J. Abrams briefly broke the silence and confirmed that a script was actively being written at Warner Bros. Pictures for a Portal movie, expressing immense optimism about the narrative direction and stating that the project was finally on the right track. And then it just completely died off. The momentum vanished and the project faded into a quiet corporate cancellation. Hollywood keeps failing because they're hardwired for heavy dialogue and linear action, but games like Portal rely on isolation and spatial puzzle logic, where the environment itself is the main character. Hollywood tried to write their way out of that silence. Valve pulled the plug to protect the soul of their work. Valve was even going to work with Adult Swim for a Team Fortress series, which was quickly cancelled. Now, over the years, plenty of movies and TV shows have featured background Easter eggs and subtle nods to Valve games like Lost, Breaking Bad, and just tons of others. We even have a Dota series on Netflix. Kane Parsons is entirely different though. He isn't just playing homage to Valve by dropping a recognizable prop into a scene. His filmmaking approach was forged directly inside Valve's games. While Hollywood executives were spending millions of dollars trying to draft a traditional script, a teenager in Northern California was learning how to direct by immersing himself directly inside Valve's design ecosystem. Long before the Backrooms, Kane Parsons was creating fan art and tribute videos for Half-Life Alyx. His deepest roots, however, go back to 2019 when he directed and released a 9-minute independent short film titled Corpus Schizophrenic, a Portal 2 short film. The short was a cryptic, highly psychological exploration of the Aperture universe told specifically from the paranoid perspective of Doug Rattmann, the legendary unseen survivor who roams the maintenance shafts of the facility. Kane has openly discussed how exploring exploring those hidden spaces as a kid completely rearranged his creative brain, admitting that the frantic writings left behind on the test chamber walls terrified him and sparked a lifelong fascination with how physical structures can manipulate human psychology. In his May 2026 profile with GQ magazine, Kane laid out his creative upbringing, stating, "Portal and Half-Life are the biggest things in my DNA for everything I've made." He also expressed a deep fundamental respect for Valve's creative integrity, specifically regarding how they handle their franchises. He didn't build his visual style by studying classic Hollywood film. He built it by playing Garry's Mod, the iconic Source Engine sandbox that allows users to construct, manipulate, and experiment with spatial physics without constraints. When A24 backed Kane to bring Backrooms to the big screen with a massive 30,000 square foot physical set, he didn't leave his Valve influence behind on YouTube. He brought them directly into the theater, scattering a series of technical Easter eggs across the film that serve as a direct nod. The most subtle, technically precise reference arrives in the sound design. During a tense sequence, a heavy door swings open in the darkness. Audiences paying close attention immediately recognize the audio asset. In a recent video breakdown with IGN, the interviewer asked Kane directly if he had slipped a specific Valve sound effect into the final mix. Kane smiled and replied, "It's very possible. The film uses the classic door creak asset from the Half-Life series. The visual parallels run even deeper in the film's third act, revolving around the character of Clark. As Clark becomes trapped and consumed by the complex, he begins covering the walls with manic, frantic sketches, including the unsettling pirate Clark artwork and handwritten existential crisis like why think in terms of magic, be realistic. The formatting, the placement, and the psychological intent are a direct cinematic translation of the Doug Rattmann dens from Portal. Kane is using the exact same environmental storytelling technique that Valve mastered, using chaotic survivor art to break up the corporate geometry of a research facility, letting the walls speak for a character who is rapidly losing their mind. Even the physical structure of the async research facility in the film feels like a direct cousin to Aperture Science, and there's even many other nods that people have been pointing out to the Source Engine and Valve's games. This brings us to the core reality of how a Portal movie can actually get made in the modern landscape. So it's not just a Hollywood movie that makes a joke out of the franchise. Valve historically rejects traditional Hollywood studio setups because major producers try to force game mechanics into corporate film templates. They pulled the plug on the J.J. Abrams era because the traditional script kept losing the atmospheric soul of the game. Kane Parsons represents the exact opposite of that failure. He is the exact type of external visionary Valve should trust with a co-production because he speaks their native language, which is why if Gabe Newell still wants to make movies about Portal or Half-Life, Kane seems like the perfect person for them to partner with. Kane was asked directly about where his career goes after the historic success of Backrooms. Despite the massive industry pressure to jump into the next big franchise, Kane has been firm about his selective approach. He explicitly stated that he has no interest in taking on massive assembly line projects like Star Wars or other bloated legacy properties, noting that he wants to limit his career to a very select amount of films that truly matter to him. This is exactly why his obsession with Portal feels so authentic. He has said the general set construction of the Portal games is something that's been in my brain for so long. I frequently have dreams where I'm just in the Aperture Center. While he remains deeply committed to seeing his current universe reach its proper narrative conclusion, his ultimate dream project is to direct a feature film adaptation of Portal. Kane is already looking into the structural possibilities of making this happen, approaching the property with what he describes as a lot of caution and a lot of curiosity. Would you rather have a director make a movie about a game because they see the IP as an easy way to make money, or a director who was a lifelong fan of the franchise. The reality is clear. The ball is now entirely in Valve's court. For 13 years, the gaming community has waited for a movie that treats their favorite worlds with artistic respect, rather than chasing cheap blockbuster tropes. Kane Parsons has just handed them the blueprint. The era of traditional Hollywood directors trying to rewrite video games seems like it could be coming to an end. The future of video game cinema belongs to the creators who grew up inside the games themselves. If Valve wants to finally push their movie ambitions, the gateway has already been built. Valve just has to open the door.